Okay, so tonight we're going to measure for custom wheels for the project I call WideFox. Now, since I'm building a wide body with WideFox, I always knew that there was going to be a point that I was going to have to measure for wheels. I have an approximate guess of what's going to fit, but because I'm using a multitude of parts between a Fox housing with SN95 axles on the 5-lug, a 3-inch wide body piece, everything is basically, you got to throw the book out. You're just going to have to measure it from the beginning. So today I'm going to measure for the wheels on WideFox, and I'm going to take along you for a little education. Now to start with, I've got WideFox basically resting on the suspension. So the rear axle is being held up with a jack, but I've got jack stands underneath just for safety. On the front side, I've got some cinder blocks under there holding up basically on the bottom of the lower control arms. And I've also leveled the car. So it's about 19.5 inches off the ground. The front is basically because of the cinder blocks and the piece of wood just kind of holding it there. And the back, I've used the jack to level it up. So 19.5 to the center line of the axle, front and rear. Now to start with, some of the tools you're going to need is obviously a straight edge that will go against the hub like you see I've got here. I've got a piece of string taped to the inside of the fender here, which gives me my outside edge. You'll have your axle, which is obviously in the car now, and then you've got a tape measure and possibly a smaller ruler or anything else just to kind of get a feel for measuring these pieces. Now when it comes to wheels, there's a lot more to deal with than just the diameter and the width. Everything's got to fit, and tonight we're going to show you kind of how to do that. So what you can see here is that the straight edge is sitting against the disc brake itself, and this is where the wheel will mount to. So I've got the lug nuts holding the disc brake or the disc itself all the way on the axle, on the hub. And then I've just got a small clamp holding this in place. So touching this inside edge now vertically shows where my hub is, and I can measure against that, against the inside, and also against the outside of the wheel. Now the string itself here is going to be just measuring vertically where the inside of the edge is. Some will measure to the outside, but because I want to make sure this tire tucks to the inside, I've got the string taped to the inside of the fender itself. So to start with, now that everything's in place, let's go ahead and measure from the inside of the wheel well, the inner tub, all the way out to the straight edge, just to kind of get a feel of what's going to fit. So right there is about 8 inches, and that's the minimum I see. Even though there's a little bit of bulge in here, 8 inches is what I need to be concerned with. Now going from the outside, from the straight edge out to the string itself, is roughly about 5.5 inches. So notice the difference. 8 on the inside of the hub, 5.5 on the out. Now why that matters is that when you look at back spacing and offset of a wheel, a width, let's say for me, if I go a 10-inch width, an offset of 0 means I have a backspace of 5. Basically splits it in half. If I have an offset from there, let's say I have a 25 offset, which is roughly an inch. What that means is that the center line of the wheel versus being at 5 will now be at 6, because it's now going to be plus 25 out versus being negative, which would be in. Now another thing to consider is the size of the hub itself. So on the SN95 axles, those are roughly just under 2 3/4 inches. Now another thing to be concerned about is from the center of the axle going out to the brake caliper. So you need to make sure the diameter of the wheel itself is going to clear that. So since I'm using just a basic brake caliper on the back, there's no big brake or anything else, really it's going to be pretty simple. So now just to clear, the inside bleeder nipple itself is about 7 inches. So from there to there. So a diameter of 14 is just barely going to clear, but since I want to go larger than that, we should be in good shape. Now, one other thing to think about is going to be the suspension travel. So from the center of the axle out, you know that the car is not going to sit level forever. It's going to hit a bump. It's going to have suspension travel on that. So you want to kind of keep in mind that you're going to have a wheel size and then a tire size also. And that may range from 1 inch to 2 inch to 3 inch, depending on what you're going to go. If you're running some big slicks, maybe you're running some road race tires, which thin sidewall. You got to kind of keep that in mind. So just keep that as you take a measurement from the center of the axle up to what would contact. And that's going to be about 18 inches for me, from the center of the axle all the way up to where the body is, to where I cut it. Okay, so the last thing I want to worry about on the rear beyond those dimensions is going to be the hub, I guess protrusion, if you want to call it that. Basically how much the hub sticks out past where the wheel is going to mount. And that's going to matter because other than the diameter, that needs to stick out into a center cap if you're going to run wheels with a center cap. So on this one here, I'm going to switch over just to my fine calibrated millimeter scale. And looking at that, it's about in the 12 millimeter range. So that's really about a ½ inch, keeping with the inches. So now with this complete, I'm going to move everything I have here over to the front edge and be able to remeasure everything there to get the fronts. Okay, so now with everything moved over to the front, string, clamps, straight edge, it's time to remeasure the same things that I did on the rear. So one thing to note on the front is that now you don't really have a wheel well tub on the inside. The thing you're going to hit most likely is either a brake caliper or a shock. So that's going to be where I'm going to measure to. So one thing to keep in mind when you're measuring is the approximate wheel size you're going to go with. If you're doing a 14-inch wheel, it's obviously going to be from the center up. It'll be about 7-ish to where that wheel is come in. So you can go from 7 up here, you get an approximate here, and then you can go straight over. If you're going to like an 18-inch wheel, for instance, you would go from 9 from the center up and then in. It doesn't really help you to measure right at the base because your wheel isn't going to be there. It's going to be at the level you're going to be at. So 14, go up 7, give it an approximate. If you're going to an 18-inch wheel, go up 9 and then measure to that point. Now once you have the inside, again measure on the outside. So now again, we're going to measure from the center of the axle or the hub itself out to the brake caliper to make sure the brake caliper is going to fit inside the wheel. And then we're going to measure the hub. So the diameter of the hub, the protrusion of the hub, and remember this has got a cap on it, so we definitely need to make sure that that's going to fit. Okay, so once you have all of that written down, now it's time you can go shopping because you now have some information about what you can look for. Now, if you're just going for a spec wheel that most places will have, you can just double check the width, the diameter, maybe the offset, or the back spacing. And those will probably get you close. But when you're doing custom fenders and that, you're probably going to take a lot of measurements. And once you find the wheel you're looking for, then you need to talk to the manufacturer because there's a little bit of difference between the actual width of the lip to the inner diameter of the tire of the wheel itself. And now that I've got this measured, it's time to go shopping for WideFox. So with that, we'll see you next time from Basin Motorsports.